Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We are talking about three awesome features of Couchbase Capella, caching, of course, flexibility, and how that can save you money. So providing some cost efficiency. Today's speakers are Tyler Mitchell, who is a senior product marketing manager, and Tim Rotak, who is director of product marketing, here to go through those features with you. Um, while you are listening, please check out the area to your right. We would love to chat with you, hear about where you're from. The docs section also has some really great resources that you can use pre or post. Here, we do have a survey online. We're just trying to get some more information from user evidence. So if you have some time, please take our survey today. It really helps us understand our customers and what our customers are getting from Couchbase. We also have a webcast coming up June 10th and 11th. That's with Tyler. It is building a future-proof AI architecture. We also have one coming up in July where we're also talking about more architecture building with Couchbase. As you know, our goal is to create a unified data platform. So not just to be a database, but to create a unified data platform. So it creates a little bit less complexity when everything is contained in one system. So we keep making improvements in that direction for you all to build faster, more flexibly, and more cost efficiently. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tim and Tyler. And thanks again so much for being here, and enjoy.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. So thank you everyone for joining. Excited to take you through this content. Tyler and I are going to give you an overview of the Couchbase data platform, specifically areas like caching and flexibility and cost efficiency, and really try and share with you some customer stories and how they're using our platform for their applications or with AI, and kind of, as we look to the future, those other things that we're adding in and doing to enhance in the area of AI. So let's begin. I'm sure you're all somewhat familiar with Couchbase. You're here on this webinar and want to learn more. Some of you might have more background than others. But for everyone on this call, I am sure that you are engaging with Couchbase in some way every single day. Couchbase is used by many of the Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies for their mission critical applications. So whether this is like financial transactions that get reviewed, shopping in terms of retailers or digital technologies and so on, whether this is in delivery systems and so forth, health systems, Couchbase is often the core data platform behind a lot of the applications that you engage with every day. So let's dig into that a little bit more. So as we talk to our customers about their application needs, what they're trying to do today as they're modernizing and looking to build AI and add that into their applications, what does that look like? What are their needs? What they're telling us is that they want to build great experiences, ensure that the end user, whether that's an internal employee or their customers, are getting a personalized experience, that it's working everywhere from cloud to edge, that they can build AI naturally into their application so users can interact in better ways. And that developers are being productive, leveraging the skills that they have and building very quickly to be able to add features to extend those applications. And then making sure we're meeting all the modern requirements in terms of massive data, supporting massive users, scalability, and performance, and having all the control. So these are, in some degree aligned with the application needs over the past, let's say, decade or so. But the AI component is definitely a big criteria that we know a lot of our customers are looking into, and how they can build these components into their applications and extend them, or develop new AI applications or agents. And so for us, working with our customers, we deliver our Couchbase data platform, and that has several layers to it. So The first layer is really about accessing the data and the workloads that we support. So a wide variety of workloads in terms of transactional, operational analytics, supporting mobile and AI type workloads and vector search and things like that. Delivering data with speed, an in-memory architecture with a distributed caching layer that has been there at the heart of our architecture since the beginning, delivering very low latency speeds at scale. And Tyler will talk more about that later. And then a platform that allows you to control that. Managing this data across the globe, across regions, across nodes, across the globe, from the cloud to the edge, having those capabilities and being able to do so at speed and scale, and then deploying the platform in a wide variety of ways as a service with our Capella solution, Kubernetes on-premise, mobile. Depending on how you want to build it, we want to make sure the platform is flexible to support your application needs. And then really ensuring that developers can build applications quickly and robust applications, leveraging the SQL that they know, leveraging AI frameworks, and building in their favorite query languages. So that's a quick overview of the Couchbase platform, and we'll dig more into that as we go along. So how is it used, right? How are we, building and supercharging applications for our customers in terms of caching and flexibility and costs and so forth? Well, here's a few key examples, I would say, where Couchbase is used in terms of different use cases, right? There's many scenarios, but these are kind of fairly common. And you can see just a few capabilities that are part of the platform that are supporting these things. So if you look at a customer like Amadeus, one of the largest travel platforms around the world, powering hundreds of millions or billions of travel searches per year, where the customers are logging in through different travel portals, accessing Amadeus's data, and getting a lot of information on flights, regions, pricing, all of those things, and they have to be delivered in near real time, right? And so you need an architecture that can deliver a product catalog with a lot of flexibility and a lot of speed to their end clients. A next example would be distributed caching and session management. We have a lot of customers who are using us and historically as a caching layer to modernize and also speed up their data. If you think of a customer like LinkedIn, nearly 1 billion registered users on the LinkedIn platform uses Couchbase as a cache so that your data profile and that information is served very quickly using key value, so that way your login experience is instantaneous. A company like Marriott, who moved from their mainframe system to and moved their registration system to Couchbase, needed to modernize, needed to make sure that the system was always up, always available, but had the flexibility so they could extend their reservation system to be booking millions of hotel rooms per day. Real-time analytics, operational analytics, a customer like Domino's uses Couchbase to take the data, their transactions, their stored transactions, their online activity, what users are purchasing, combine that with their shopping history and be able to provide them with offers of new campaigns. Historically, they did this with a different analytics database. It was taking them weeks to roll out new campaigns. They moved to Couchbase. They were able to roll out new marketing campaigns within hours. FICO is one in terms of the AI space and machine learning, and Tyler will get more into this, but this is an example of customers working with us to build really fast modern AI applications. So I'll leave that for Tyler to talk about. PepsiCo is a company using our mobile technology to deliver offline capabilities to their delivery drivers. And if you think about caching as a way to speed up applications, in terms of the mobile technology, mobile platforms, offline access means that the data is always there. It's always on. So you don't really have to worry about caching because the data is persistent on the device, but you do have to work about data synchronization. And we'll talk more about that later. Carnival, example of a big organization improving customer experience, using thousands of IoT sensors on their ships, using event trigger systems to deliver better experience for their end users. And a company like Verizon we help them manage their IoT platform, Thingiverse, where they're tracking 50, 60 million devices with hundreds of millions of data points moving every hour. So the Couchbase platform, delivers both breadth and flexibility, but also high speed at scale to support use cases like this. So some of those use cases are, I would say, more traditional use cases. But now everyone's talking about AI, how we're going to do AI, and what does that mean in terms of my database, my data platform, and the data underneath? Well, if you think about the way we built applications in the past, it was fairly simple from the standpoint of the data inputs versus what was in the database itself, right? You think of a typical user application, you have drop-down boxes, right? It's very limited, it's fairly structured, and the data underneath is fairly structured. But we're moving to a new paradigm where we're talking about AI agents, and they're working more autonomously, right? So there's a lot more variability. We're talking about users interacting with systems by a natural language. So it's not just drop-down boxes. We're speaking to these AI systems, and so that adds a lot of variability. We want to include, in terms of data, unstructured data, right? Because there's tons of value in an organization in terms of unstructured data. That too adds a lot more variability. And LLMs and AI models are very much like a black box, right? So that flexibility. So there's a lot more variation in how these systems are going to work together. There's more components working together. They're talking in more of a natural language context. So it makes sense that JSON is the mechanism for transferring and communication between these different components. And so all of that means that your data needs to be cleaner between your systems, and you need to have more control. So it's really about rethinking that stack. And we'll talk more about our AI solutions later on. But those key requirements, align to the strengths of the Couchbase platform. Real-time speed, which is kind of our bread and butter at scale. Flexibility and control, being able to work with JSON, having that throughout our platform, but maintaining control over the systems. Leveraging AI and machine learning. We talked a little bit about FICO. We'll tell you more about that later as well. And having a platform that works across different clouds, works with, integrates into different systems, and gives you a lower TCO by having many of the core components, core functionality that you'll need to build those agentic systems. Okay, so I want to talk about the data platform a little bit more in depth from a slightly different angle. So let's say you're building an application or an agent. Let's say it's agentic AI, or it's a RAG chatbot, which is kind of more on the top left, or something maybe more traditional like Customer 360, or you're just looking for something to manage personalization and profiles. That's kind of your core application. Well, the Couchbase platform underneath, really we're going to be talking, we have 4 core pillars to that. The first is the transactional services. So this is, you can think of maybe traditional database management, CRUD and ACID transactions, where we're storing things using key value to move data very quickly in and out, persisting it, storing it in JSON. That's kind of like classic bread and butter, and Tyler will cover that in more detail. Our mobile edge services is really how do we help customers build applications that work across the globe, edge, IoT devices, sync, work offline, peer-to-peer sharing. And that's been a core of the platform for nearly a decade now. Our analytics services, like I mentioned with Domino's, is how do we help take a portion of our data from those operational applications and help our customers understand that data more quickly without needing a data warehouse to go to, and take that data and then be able to leverage that back in the core transactional services and the core application. That's what our analytics services are about. And then the AI services allow customers to build AI agents, AI applications, manage the vector search process, and we'll dig in more there. And of course, then the platform leveraging JSON and SQL throughout, interacting with data, whether that's structured, semi-structured, unstructured data, or integrating with AI systems. And then for customers, having the choice and flexibility to deploy this either with our enterprise server or enterprise edition self-managed model, or our Capella database as a service model, where we're managing the platform on their behalf. So I talked maybe a bit more on the technical side and talked about some of the speeds and so on. But all of that in the end leads to business benefits, right? A company like Rakuten Viber able to, in their transition from a competing database technology, moving to Couchbase, reduce their cost by 60% by having a huge reduction in servers, and that's core to and directly related to the scalability, the performance, the in-memory architecture that we deliver. Company like BroadJump reducing storage and Revolut reducing their cost. By having a flexible platform that covers a wide breadth of use cases, and all those technologies in one platform mean they can leverage more and utilize more of the Couchbase platform, all under one technology house. A company like Amadeus that I mentioned earlier talked about returning value in less than 12 months, and a company like Sky improving sign-in, so that improving customer retention, right, which in the end affects the bottom line. So you can see here different examples across different industries, different verticals with different use cases. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, and he's going to talk to you more about our traditional transactional services for enterprises.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And for anybody, those past business benefit examples are in customer stories on our website. So dive in to see those if you want to dig in more. But all of those examples and more.
And if you download this PowerPoint presentation, the PDF at the end, the links are embedded in that screenshot, so you can link to them very easily.
That's great. Yeah, and for all of those customers and the others we haven't even mentioned, the core kind of underlying platform that is what we're calling transactional services here all have common requirements that really are essential to building a modern data platform. And we'll talk a lot about AI services and all the latest new features and new kinds of industry movement that we see and requirements for technology. But these ones that are common database challenges are really, they haven't gone away. In fact, they're more essential than ever, because if your foundational database or data platform cannot handle scalability and performance challenges, then your new AI, etc., features that you need will not be high performance enough for a modern interaction. Tim will dive more into AI later. But so we talk about at least 5 common database challenges. Flexibility, as Tim was noting, across different industries means it's really a general data platform that can provide the needs for your market or for your application, regardless of what kind of use case or industry you're in. And then we get into the idea of performance, where you need a data platform that can actually provide responses in milliseconds instead of seconds. And especially when we're getting into AI interactions where you might have chatbots and things like that, it's essential for you to have that millisecond response as you scale too. So as your data volumes grow, it shouldn't impact negatively your performance. And I'll get into some real world stats for those in a minute. But we're also all about the idea of familiarity. We use SQL++. It's a SQL-based query language that allows you to actually interact with JSON data in Couchbase, just as if they're regular tables. And there's a ton of flexibility in there, especially when you're doing joins across JSON documents and you're doing arrays and queries and transforming your data within the database query itself. It's pretty amazing and powerful when you get into it. But if you know SQL, you already know almost all of SQL++, so there's no barrier there for you to get into it. When we talk about high availability, applications have to be on all the time. They can't go down. If they're down, they have to be down for such a short period of time that nobody can notice. We'll get into each of these a little further down the line. But also, you'll notice from Tim's slide earlier with the different business benefits, the lower TCO is essential for really proving the value of the Couchbase data platform. And our customers have cost savings that I hadn't seen other places in the market. A little bit about how we've grown Couchbase. This is an enterprise data platform over the years, and we've been around for a while. See on the left 2011 till today, on the right 2025. And on the bottom of this slide, we just show the different aspects of the foundation that we've built, from starting from an integrated cache up to having clustering, up to having geo-replication, synchronization across clusters, and more advanced vector search indexing. And then on the top, you see the different kinds of features that we've added over time as well, starting with just raw JSON documents up to now SQL querying and more of the natural language querying and graph traversal, etc. So we've grown not just the access services, but also the performance foundation to keep up with those underlying needs and requirements. Couchbase is inherently a memory-first architecture, and this was what made us a leading cache provider, even when we just had a minimal feature set. All the nodes in a cluster, and we are a clustered database technology, all the nodes in the cluster actually talk to each other through from direct in-memory streaming between the different components. So your data can move between these different kinds of components within the cluster as fast as mathematically possible from memory to memory between nodes. And this also applies to external services and different things too, where we have integrations with other platforms. We have very sophisticated streaming technology behind the scenes that you take advantage of just by turning on a node, adding another node. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Sorry, Tim, I'm clicking on slides on my screen, but the different slides.
Oh, just
the next one. Yeah,
just tell me to go ahead. I'll advance
the deck. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about real operational performance. This is not an exaggeration. These are real benchmarks using the YCSB workloads. So you can go and look up those workloads specifically developed for NoSQL databases. We did on the left here, you'll see operations per second. And one of the things that stands out, aside from performing orders of magnitude higher than our competitors, the idea that that we can do more performance with fewer nodes than other platforms can do with many nodes. So even if you threw 18 nodes at some of our competitors, they wouldn't perform as well as we do in this benchmark with just 3 nodes. And hint, hint, this is where the TCO benefits are coming for our customers. They're able to cut the number of nodes and their infrastructure costs down substantially by migrating to our platform. And of course, on the performance side, the cost per billion operations on the right-hand slide, where smaller is better, that's the direct reflection of that TCO. So Couchbase Capella in red is smaller than all the others. Even with many, many nodes, they still can't perform well. Our competitors can't perform well. Next slide. The idea of maintaining reliability is a very complex subject. Anyone who's tried to build reliability into a clustered network of nodes themselves knows that there's a lot of scenarios that you have to think of, a lot of edge cases, a lot of replication and networking disruption challenges and recovery challenges. We have just kind of 3 scenarios or 3 kind of steps here as an example where our primary application server with Couchbase can actually automatically maintain replicas for you. So you might have an active database or an active cluster, but there's a replica within that cluster. And then when one of those nodes goes down, it actively switches over to, across number 2 and number 3 here, it switches over to using that replica as the active node in the cluster. And then you go off and create your recovery, your node and add it back in to your cluster. So there's a bunch of scenarios that if you dig into them and you want to know more, just search for these terms: continuous replication, auto sharding, and auto failover. And we've built all of these into the kind of the foundation of the platform itself. So you are not having to manage all of these components. Many of them are integrated and happen automatically.
And along that line, Tyler, the active nature of these things means that every one of the nodes within Couchbase can read and write, right? So that's critical to data movement and data processing. Whereas in some of our competitors have a primary or secondary architecture with different components in between, and you see some of the results in the benchmark is that they're moving data between different components They have different components that can't do the writing and so forth. And that's slowing the systems down. This is why this active-active, every node read and writes, data moving in memory is really what drives the speed of the architecture with our customers. Let's go to
yeah, that's a great point. And not only do we have kind of intercluster, but we have cross data center applications. So you can have multiple clusters running in different geographic regions and maintain the connectivity that you need. And you can also have your data co-located in the region closest to the users of your application. And that cluster can be synchronized with the other clusters globally. So the idea of keeping your data as close to your users as possible is essential for kind of really today's real-time application, especially mobile applications around the world. And the final slide here for the transactional side is showing how we can actually deliver all of this with a single node. Obviously, the geo-replication, things like that are a little more complex, but as developers can jump into using our data platform with all of those capabilities we mentioned, and with a very solid architectural foundation, just using a single node, or a more complex situation where you have almost a dozen nodes in the example on the right. When you're ready to deploy it, you can actually move your workloads and provide resources for specific features that are needed, and isolate that workload from other features that are running. So let's say you're doing querying, but you don't want the indexing to interfere with your query performance. Well, we can run those on different nodes within your cluster, so that workload isolation optimizes the use of your infrastructure. So that's the core foundation. Everything else is built on top of that, and it follows the same concepts and ideas of lowering TCO, but also squeezing every ounce of performance out of the resources that you're paying for. Let's go on to mobile services, Tim.
And I just want to reiterate one thing here in the deployment flexibility here. So some of our competition, when you deploy their software across multiple nodes, you're deploying all of their services everywhere, and you don't have this sort of flexibility. So this is where, as Tyler was saying, you can really align the technology to your needs. If you're deploying for speed, right, you can move the software to different machines where you've got hardware that's going to have more memory and so forth. You can reduce the indexes, the machines you're running your indexes on. If you're using full text search, you can bump that up. So you really have a lot of control here, which aligns to not only performance, but then that TCO, right? That cost efficiency of, hey, what I'm looking for in terms of deploying the data layer to match my application layer, you have the control to make sure that you're using your infrastructure in the right way to help reduce your costs and get the speeds you need.
Yeah, and if you only need a certain feature for a certain period of time, you can add a node dedicating those resources, do your whatever you wanted to do temporarily, and roll that back and remove that node later on. It's really flexible. And the point I didn't point out also is this idea of the cluster manager in these diagrams shows a single point of contact for your applications and for your SDKs to point to. You don't need to connect to each one of these things separately through different interfaces, different ports, etc. The cluster manager knows what services are available on what nodes and routes everything as efficiently as possible behind the scenes.
And it's happening automatically. So as you scale, let's say you go from 12 nodes or 6 nodes to 12 nodes, you don't have to make any application changes. The data will automatically, as you move from 6 nodes to 12 nodes, be redispersed over those 12 nodes. And automatically the application, just using the SDK, you don't need to make any changes. It will just go to where the data is and go so directly, so for speed and efficiency. But let's go on. We got a bunch of other things we want to cover on this quick webinar. Mobile services. So I highlighted them at the beginning. This is something that Couchbase has been doing for over a decade now, and has a lot of strong history here that we want to highlight in terms of building these sorts of applications, right? So if we think about modern edge challenges or mobile challenges, they're still similar to where they were probably, I would say, 5 or 10 years ago in terms of it's really about delivering a good user experience. I mean, if you look at stats on mobile apps in terms of how users drop off if their experience isn't good, it's incredibly high, and that's in both in organizations and without. I know we have a client who they were having a problem with data syncing. They wanted their employees to use their application. They only had about a 40% adoption. They moved to Couchbase. That went up to about 85%. Because the data was reliable, and then it was a much better solution for their customers. So it's about connectivity, overcoming security, complex data topologies, right? There's so many different ways that you can structure these things, and then managing the infrastructure and the costs as part of those process. And so a company like PepsiCo had built an application for their mobile delivery drivers that I'd hinted at earlier. And those drivers, their Frito-Lay drivers, as they went into cities or they were very rural location and lost connectivity, those team members would have to essentially go back to paper and write down on paper everything that they delivered, everything they picked up. And when they finally got to an area where they could sync up, they could then type in what they had delivered and so forth, right? So a big pain. Now they don't have to worry about that. They've got Couchbase Lite, our mobile database, embedded in the application, so the data is always there. It's always synchronized. It works even offline. We're talking about 30,000 users approximately managing orders, managing their merchandising and delivery, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of documents that are managed on a daily basis. And so the key components to that, as I mentioned, Couchbase Lite, our embeddable database that goes in the application or an IoT device. That's where the data sits and is accessed by the application. It has peer-to-peer syncing, so data can be shared between devices on those applications. And then in the cloud, we have our synchronization, our transactional services, right? Our traditional NoSQL database in the service as a cloud. And then the real smarts, the intelligence of all of this is the synchronization, the managing of this data between the cloud and the edge, managing the users, managing conflict resolutions, controlling this in a smart way that is both efficient from a data perspective, but also a cost perspective, right? So that's critical. And so if we drill into that a little bit more, let's talk about that multi-tier processing, what that looks like. So on the bottom here, you have your cloud data center where you're storing your data. You might have an edge data center where you've got additionally the transactional services data stored there with our synchronization services. And then you have your third tier, which are like your mobile devices or IoT devices, and they're all interacting. And you can do different, as I was talking about, different topologies. Like you don't necessarily need the middle layer. You can have the smartphones syncing to the cloud, right? But you can mix and match this as you need, all with the security and all the synchronization built in. We've done this all for you, so it makes it a lot easier to deploy these things. And in this scenario, we're looking at like that PepsiCo situation where you've got thousands of end clients and so forth. But we also have some customers who have slightly different requirements where they're extremely resource constrained. So those edge devices, like or maybe a retail store or in a warehouse or an airplane, have very, very limited compute capabilities, limited storage capabilities, but they still need some synchronization. So we have a new offering called Couchbase Edge Server, which is part of the overall mobile offering, essentially blending the two, giving customers even more options as they deploy mobile solutions. And obviously, we want to talk about AI. So AI at the edge, Couchbase was the first in the industry to offer vector search, not only in the cloud and our on-premise solution, but also in our mobile database, right? So this allows customers to build applications at the edge that have vector search. You could build a RAG application at the edge using a small language model and give you a large variety of options, predictive AI, and so forth. So Couchbase was the first in the industry to support it in all three tiers. And then quickly, this is, I think, the final slide on mobile, just kind of highlighting some additional customer stories. As I mentioned, there'll be a bunch of customer stories at the beginning, and obviously mentioned PepsiCo. We've spoken a lot about our large customers and so forth, But I also mentioned that startups and small organizations use Couchbase and our database as a service. It makes it a lot easier for smaller organizations. Quantic is a great example. Approximately 50 people at that organization that make a point of sale system for their clients, retailers. Thousands of their clients are using their devices that have Couchbase Lite built into that device, so it's always on. They can always transact. If you're a retailer, if you run a restaurant, and you have a point of sale device that goes offline and doesn't work, you've lost business, you've lost revenue, so that can't work for you. So Quantic, a very good example of Couchbase Mobile, database as a service with Capella, always on. Emirates Airlines, in the airline space, their crew, their flight crew, their ground staff have an application that allows them to manage their data of the user experience and that critical transition when an airline lands at the airport and needs to do the switchover of everything. Used to be done all on paper. Now they're doing this in a digital format, digital application supported by Couchbase. Lotum's a gaming company using our Couchbase Mobile. Anthrex is a very interesting in the healthcare industry. They build surgical equipment. Couchbase Mobile is embedded into their mobile equipment, or sorry, into their surgical equipment. It's also built into the equipment and technology that's in the surgical and operating room. So the devices are syncing data to the equipment in the room with the surgeons, but then also syncing to the cloud. So that 3-tier architecture in full play in the Arthrex scenario. Hammerhead is a device maker of for cycling. So think of sporting equipment. Proximus for their field engineers. Proximus is a television telco in Belgium. Their field service engineers have a Couchbase application to have better conversations with their customers. They have their data with them all the time. And Groundhog is a company that makes applications for mining equipment that goes underground. Talk about not having connectivity. That's a great example of being able to support data always on, always reliable. So that's Couchbase Mobile. And now we're going to get into our AI services. We talked a little bit about agentic AI and AI applications at the beginning. I showed you this slide. I just wanted to bring it back and really kind of to highlight this. You know, in this new world of AI, the complexity that we're building of these multi-agent systems, adding more and a much more flexible variety of data and the AI models and getting that all to work together is extremely complex. And so it requires a bunch of different things beyond just a traditional application, right? You've got different data technologies where the data is going to be stored, different workloads. Having a unified data platform takes care of that. The LLM hallucinations that we're all familiar with, right? How do we overcome those? Retrieval augmented generation, where the database is used to leverage the corporate data and provide that to the LLM before the response goes back to the end user, right? So the storing the data in the database in a vectorized format is critical, and we'll talk more about that. But providing guardrails and keyword filters to control that LLM, including unstructured data. With many organizations who are still trying to figure out, they've got all this unstructured data gold that they want to use and build in and get into their applications. How do you do that? Well, you need to come up with a way to automatically vectorize and ingest that data so they can be used with AI. You got to protect your IP and data safely, right? So your model should be in your environment and secure so that you have control over where that data goes. You want to scale with performance. You need that in-memory speed, that super low latency as all these components are interacting with each other. And we know that the LLMs can be slow, right? Especially if you're asking them complex questions. So you need the speed everywhere in your system. Controlling costs with things like semantic cache. We'll talk about this more later, but it's a great way to help basically limit the number of calls to the LLM, which we know are very expensive. And then providing memory for AI agents, short-term memory, long-term memory, and making sure that they don't drift off course by monitoring their interactions. We'll talk more about that in a second. And so when we look at the data architecture that's needed for AI, a siloed strategy of using one technology here and another technology here, along with your AI components, it just doesn't make sense. You've got too much to manage. To maintain the visibility over, plus all the integration work, the handoffs, every handoff leads to risk, right? Leads to more latency. If you're thinking about building agents, how do you manage those agents and all the data they interact with when you're interacting with all these different data sources, right? And then you have to think of like the pure from cost efficiency, the factors of licensing all the platforms and support and managing them, just kind of the standard process of taking care of all of these different platforms. Okay, so with the Couchbase data platform, the one area that I wanted to talk about is the AI services pillar. So in this scenario, what I'm going to be highlighting is the new components that we're building into the platform around AI to make it easier for our customers to build agentic applications or AI applications, right? And so we do that by making it easier to safely work with models, LLMs and embedding models. And we have a partnership with NVIDIA where customers will be able to choose a wide variety of models that they want to work with and control. And they do that using our model service. And the model service is really about choosing your models, hosting your models, managing your models, managing control over them with like keyword filtering and caching and value-added services, all within your environment so that your data doesn't leave. Now, for customers that want to use external models like from their CSP or OpenAI, that's absolutely possible and we can do that. But we also have this great way with NVIDIA to make sure that the data and the models are close together. In terms of bringing data in, your unstructured data, tapping into that gold that I talk about, right? Our unstructured data service and vectorization service help automate that process. And I'll show you some of this on the next slide, which will give you more of a flow. It might make it easier to understand. And the agent catalog is really about controlling and defining your AI agents to build those applications in a robust way, not just from the beginning, but over time. So let's jump into the next slide and kind of give you a picture of how those different components work together. So if we think about building an application from the beginning processes, ingesting your data to good governance at the end, if we wanted to build a retrieval augmented generation application where we're going to be using data in the database to improve our LLM's results, let's start with taking our internal unstructured data. So let's say they're PDFs. And we want to first convert them to JSON. So we do that with our unstructured data service, which goes through, it's essentially a workflow where you're picking where the data is sourced and where the destination is. It's converted into JSON and stored in the Couchbase database. So you could query it using SQL that Tyler spoke about. The next step is then vectorizing it, right? Because the LLMs understand vector embeddings. And so that's critical to vector search and critical to the retrieval augmented generation process. So we vectorize that data. So let's say you've got PDFs, technical manuals. Let's say you've got information from partners or internal emails or things like that you want to be building into your system. You convert it to JSON, you vectorize it. The vectorization service will also create the indexes automatically, so you don't have to worry about that process. And you're leveraging either OpenAI or our model service to pick a variety of models from, as I said, NVIDIA, right? As well as when you're setting that up, what you're doing is you're ensuring the low latency, but you're also defining the model. So you're setting up guardrails so it doesn't go off course. You're limiting keywords and the LLM caching. Again, caching is a big theme for us in terms of ensuring that we're getting speed in the system and reducing calls to the model to save you money. So now we're in the database. Those vectors and the indexes are created. They're in the database with your user profiles, with your products, your transactions, all the other information within the Couchbase data platform. And now you're building your AI application or your AI agents. And what you're doing is being able to make calls to the database, doing vector search to gather that unstructured data, or you're doing traditional SQL calls to get your product information, transaction information, all the information you need, bring it back into the application. And then you're using those vectors with the LLMs to produce those better results. We also provide something called AI functions, which make it easier for the application and developers to leverage the power of the LLM to do things like data classification, sentiment analysis, summary. Using our SQL query language, they can write and use an AI function work with the model, and process data to do some light data analysis. And then comes our agent catalog that I hinted at before. This is where customers will define what their individual agents are and their components, the tools they're using, the functions that they'll be using, and more importantly, then the governance. So over time, as different users are asking different questions of the application, and the application or the agent is using different tools, using different functions, and different versions of those over time, how do you manage that? How do you make sure they're not going off track? And if they do, how do you pinpoint what the issue is and how do you resolve that, right? So the agent catalog is all about storing each transaction, each transcript, if you will, between a user, the agent, the tools that were used, the function that was used, the data that was retrieved, keeping that all together and then versioning those over time. And then we have additional tools on that to kind of help spot outliers. So when do those things go off track? We help flag that information so you can see, okay, here we had an issue. What tool was used? What was called? What was the query? What was the prompt? What was the issue? Right? That's the core and the real genius of the agent catalog. I talked about caching a little bit in terms of speeding up applications, making them more affordable, and specifically with the LLM, semantic caching. And so I just want to give a quick example of what that means. Really, you could think about a traditional cache where a SQL query goes to a database and the same exact query gets the same information. You store that information in cache so you don't have to go to the database. Semantic cache is similar, where you're preventing those calls, in this case to the LLM, because the query by the user is similar semantically. And so therefore, things like, I'm looking for brown leather shoes in size 10, when another user is saying, I'm looking to buy size 10 shoes that are brown in color, are essentially the same, right? And so we don't need to go to the LLM. That can save a lot of LLM calls and saves time and critically money. And then conversational cache is a way that we can help the application add much bigger history than kind of are built in, because LLMs don't come with memory. So some of the organizations are trying to build in some initial memory into those applications, but in your custom application, you'll want to build in a conversational cache so you can extend that memory to make the experience better for end users. And both of these are part of the model service within Couchbase. So that way, when you're configuring your LLM, you tick a box, you say, I want to turn on a kind of our traditional cache. You tick another box, you say, I want to turn on the semantic cache. You tick another box, and you say, I want to turn on the conversational cache. So you can very easily add these technologies in, so you don't have to design them and use another technology. It's all part of the Couchbase platform. Okay, so kind of wrapping up on AI, what are customers going to be getting with our AI services? Streamlining the development and the deployment of their applications, increased security and privacy, the ability to bring in unstructured data much more easily, much more efficiently, a better way to design and build and manage agents over time, leverage those AI functions that I highlighted to get better use of your data with LLMs, and critically, turnkey caching solutions that help increase speed and lower your total cost of ownership. So I'm going to turn it back to Tyler. He's going to give us some more on customer outcomes and tell you a few more of those customer stories.
Yeah, just to keep showing you that this is real and there's real customers behind this stuff and using these things. Jump to our customer stories. We have in this case, FICO, which is a caching and user profile store use case. We have dozens of other scenarios and use cases for you to find the exact fit for your application. FICO is one of those companies that works behind the scenes creating products and services for their customers to prevent fraud and to detect fraud as it occurs or before it occurs. And they have actually they're the #1 fraud detection platform, it says here, and 65% of the world's credit and debit cards kind of go through their system. So you can imagine the volume of data and the number of user profiles that they manage and accounts that they manage. It's going to be extremely high. And also we expect, and their customers expect, sub-millisecond latency and high throughput throughout their applications. So they use a combination of a variety of our technologies behind the scenes, but the primary data platform is able to meet their requirements for those low response times. Because of that foundation that I just went through earlier, as well as the new features that we've added more recently, we can provide the capabilities to support their machine learning requirements and really scale beyond the ability of the traditional relational database systems. They actually had to evaluate Couchbase against MongoDB for speed and scalability. And as you saw in those benchmarks, once you do that, you start to see where the higher performer is, and that Couchbase data platform exceeds the others while providing those sub-millisecond response times in their environment. So the other aspect that we have with many of our customers, especially in these financial use cases, is the requirement for 24/7 application uptime. So with those high availability and distributed, replicated environments, this provides the capabilities that they needed. On to the next use case. It's a little bit of a different one. Jinmu is an IT consulting company, and they've produced what they call an AI assistant for helping to track and understand, analyze their virtual meetings for their customers. This is an artificial intelligence use case specifically, and they had to evaluate which platforms would provide the ability to combine their AI capabilities with the real-time data platform capabilities. They had to have a database that could not only do key value lookups and handle document storage, but also do vector searching. So they were able to evaluate Couchbase again against MongoDB and decide that Couchbase supported the environment that they needed the most. Couchbase is delivering 10 millisecond response times for them across 70 million documents in their system, probably more by the time that we wrote this down. And with 8,000 operations per second, you really are pushing the capabilities to a whole new level here. And just to wrap up, the next slide shows us is a summary of how our customers are reducing that cost of ownership and reducing the complexity of the environment. So on the left side here, we see multiple technologies. There's caching, there's full text search, there's graph, there's relational databases in the top left. All of these things where you need a little slice of each, simplify it from multiple databases down to a smaller, more cohesive, and more enjoyable, to be honest, platform with everything all in one. And then you use, as we saw before, you scale up the parts you need the most, you can scale down the parts you don't need, and you can ignore parts that you don't need as well. And the benefits on the right-hand side here, really, if we didn't make it possible for developers to code faster and manage their applications in a more or a less complex environment, we would really be suffering and failing at our mission. But we are providing these benefits. Aside from just having lower cost of ownership, there's also lower cost for administrative functions and management of those resources. So by making it easier for developers to code, they can also just deploy more efficiently. And the final stat I want to leave you with before Tim wraps up is that we looked across our customer base and we thought, well, how would we decide what was significant cost savings? Well, significant cost savings would be, let's say, reducing my costs by 50%. Well, we found across our customer base that 53% of our customers achieved that cost reduction, which is very significant. If you can imagine reducing your IT budget costs or even your personal finance costs by 50%, it would be life-changing. And for a lot of users of our data platform, it is life-changing. On to the next one, Tim.
All right, thanks, Tyler. I will take over and kind of wrap us up. So in terms of Couchbase is a data platform for critical applications, right? What we tried to show you here is that we're helping customers build applications and develop them throughout their entire life cycle. Whether you're starting small with a single node, you start with our Capella Database as a Service free tier, you start building out these applications, testing them, scaling them out, leveraging caching so that you're getting that speed, not only in a single cluster, but in multi-region around the globe. You're able to deliver mobile access for applications if that's what you're trying to achieve. And then monitoring and evolving that and governing that over time is critical, and making sure that we cover that. And so in terms of AI, Couchbase is here. We're helping customers where that data is very flexible, and you really need a solid data platform underneath that's working quickly. And so we're helping customers, the platform's eliminating multiple data technology and caches, right? So you're simplifying, you're saving, you're getting the speeds you need with broad capabilities. We talked about different use cases across different industries, whether it's like product profiles and vector search and real-time analytics and so forth. Supporting vector as part of the RAG workflow and across our technology stack. So if you're looking at building something on premise, you're looking in the clouds, you're looking to mobile, and an AI use case, we'll be able to support you with those efforts. And then the proven speed and flexibility. Tyler talked a little bit about some of the benchmarks, the third-party benchmarks that were done. You can go to our website. There are plenty of links to reports from that third-party Alteros. There's another website called BenchAnt. They do a lot of third-party benchmarking of many different NoSQL databases. Couchbase is one of them. You can see those independent studies as well, proving and showing the speed and flexibility of Couchbase, our architecture, our caching technology, all coming together. And then finally, as organizations are looking to build AI applications or agents, right? How can we help them build safe and scalable and controllable AI, and do that in a smart way, a more automated and simplistic way with our different services that are automating vectorization, the model service, which gives you control and capabilities for configuration and caching and things like that, and our agent catalog, which helps you build and govern your agents over time, which is going to be critical. So as we wrap up, just kind of a few links and QR codes. Again, if you are interested, if you haven't tried the Capella Database as a Service, we have our free tier you can sign up for very quickly. Go in there for testing out your applications. It's free forever. Just as long as you're using it, you have access to the Couchbase platform. Our AI services that we were talking about today, we're in private preview. You can sign up if you're interested in learning more and getting more involved and trying those out. You can sign up with this QR code. All of these QR codes are in this presentation and the links as well. So in Goldcast, I think it's the docs section, has access to this presentation as a PDF. And then finally, Suzanne mentioned it at the beginning. If you haven't clicked on those other links that I sent you, and one thing we'd love you to do right now is take this survey. It's about Couchbase and just kind of your database priorities. We always want to understand what customers and different organizations are doing in terms of their databases. It's 9 questions. I did it earlier this morning. It took me under 2 minutes. So it's really fast. It's just multiple choice, click, click, click. But it truly helps us a lot. And hopefully it's not a big a burden on your point. I'm not a big fan of surveys unless I know they're going to be less than 5 minutes, then I'll do them. So I want to be clear, this is less than 2 minutes. You can do this. So, and with that, I will wrap up and say thank you very much. Thanks to Tyler for joining. Suzanne, anything you want to conclude with that I missed?
No, thanks so much, you guys. Really super appreciate all the great info. As Charlie is saying in the chat, more cowbell. So excited to see that. Nope, just check out the docs section, and we'll be sending out an email in the next 24 hours, so you can view this on demand if you happen to want to review it, or if you didn't catch us the first time. So thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.